Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Teresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment in music education. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow. Teresa, today's episode was fun. It's so when we talk about growing independent young musicians, like sometimes that feels like such a big task, but it was really nice to talk about some small steps that you can make with Lauren and Amy.
Yeah, it really was. And they're so much fun, their passion, their enthusiasm. And I think it's really neat, the fact that they do get to work together, right, in their jobs. And I think that's such a big part of it. But yeah, today's interview was fun. You're going to love it. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are so excited to be here for the first time interviewing two guests at once. Go us. I know, fancy. And what's neat is these two are not strangers to Pass the Baton. They were both actually in Pass the Baton. They were willing to share their stories, so that's awesome. And now they're here to talk about even more awesome stuff. So welcome to Amy Rever-Oberle and Lauren Staniszewski. Oh no, Lauren, I had it for a moment.
You had it.
I had
Staniszewski.
Staniszewski. There we go. All right. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
What she said. Thanks for having us.
So before we kind of get into what we're here for, can you guys introduce yourselves? Tell us like what you're doing now, your teaching situation, stuff like that. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Amy.
All right. Hi, I'm Amy Rever-Oberle. I'm the band director at Hart Middle School in Rochester Hills, Michigan. I teach 6th through 8th grade band. This is going to be my 15th year of teaching. Before this, I taught in a rural district. I was K-12, but now I am all middle school all the time, and I love it.
Awesome. All right, Lauren.
My name is Lauren Staniszewski, and I am the band director at Stoney Creek High School in Rochester. In fact, I am the high school that Amy's middle school feeds into. So Amy and I work quite a bit together throughout the school year. This is my 17th year of teaching. This will be my 10th anniversary at Stoney. So I'm very excited to be celebrating 10 years at Stoney. But I have taught everything that the state of Michigan legally says that I can teach according to my teaching certificate at this point. But my teaching position now, and as it has been in Rochester for a good many years, is teaching 3 high school ensembles on a daily basis. That's our concert band, our symphony band, and our wind ensemble. In addition, our marching band, which meets in the fall, and our jazz band, which meets in the winter, opposite semesters. And then I also teach one section of 6th grade band, collaborating with Amy on a daily basis as well. So it's quite a pleasure. We have the benefit of our schools being geographically very close, right across the street from each other. So each day I teach my high school schedule, and then I just scurry across the street and have lunch with Amy before teaching the middle school portion.
Oh, that's so fun.
I think it's really awesome when you can find somebody that you can talk to, right? Like, so we're just so stuck in our own silos sometimes. And so it's kind of nice to be able to walk across the street and see another person, teaching a similar job, right? And so you can kind of bounce ideas off each other.
Yes.
It's been a big benefit.
Very nice. Yeah. So you guys like to talk a lot about teaching independent musicianship. Do you want to maybe explain kind of the obvious of what does that mean, and and maybe how you got interested in that topic?
I'll start from the middle school, because I think what we've worked on with our middle school students is meant to then build them up to what Lauren does with them at the high school. So at the middle school level, these are the babies. These are like day one. How do I open my case without throwing things on the floor? And and obviously things are very, very teacher led at the very beginning because we have to get some fundamentals figured out and things like that. But after that, we're very big on them being able to problem solve and figure things out for themselves, because that not only helps them develop as musicians, but we're also developing human beings. And there's not always one specific answer, and they need to learn how to figure out, what are my resources? I don't need to go up to Miss Rever every time I can't remember a fingering. I have a fingering chart in my book. I have neighbors around me who know all the fingerings. I carry around a computer in my pocket. That's my phone. It's all blurred, but I carry around a computer in my pocket, and I can ask Siri for a clarinet fingering chart. They've got so many resources, and they're so used to, especially coming out of elementary school. There's one teacher and there's one kind of source, and they spent this time on this one day. And now now there's 6 teachers and figuring out the different classrooms and different routines and things like that. And part of it came for me, it was a twofold thing. Part of it was, I'll be honest, self-preservation. To start with, because a lot of times our beginner classes, it's not been uncommon since I've been at Hart to have beginner classes of 40 to 50 kids. These are kids who have literally never played an instrument in their lives. So we've got to learn some independent skills because there's one of me and there's 45 or 50 of them. But then beyond that, for them to actually be musicians, to be able to speak musically, how do we make that sound better? Why didn't we like that? It doesn't have to be, a lot of us grew up, our musical tradition was, this is what the conductor tells you, and this is what you will do, and this is how you will do it, and this is the exact time and way in which we will do it. And then you're just building really great, like, little automatons. And that's not music. We do music because we feel it. It's part of who we are, and helping them develop that, whether they become musicians in the long run, or they're just consumers of music, or just good human beings. Those are things that they need to have to work their way, to really start to work their way up, as both student musicians, but as people as well.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, from the learner experience, like, just the feeling of, I can figure this out on my own, and I'm not necessarily completely stuck. I think that just knowing, like, oh, wait, I can do this and figure out some of those things is empowering to them, of course, too.
Yes.
Amy did a great job of summarizing a lot of the groundwork. I mean, it's been really a blessing having her at Hart, because we think the same very much philosophically. And the whole idea of students becoming independent humans and problem solvers, and are thinking more critically about the music that they're making, so that way they are in turn able to express themselves that much more richly, is really what I then take at the high school, and I try to develop that to an even greater degree. So I not only am working to have my students think about, what did you think about the sound that you made, and how do we evolve that, and would you change anything about it, and how do we grow that, because you're learning not only to use your voice, but that you can shape your voice, and you can have an artistic thought. Are you thinking artistically, or are you just, playing Guitar Hero, Band Hero, pushing the buttons? Really trying to make sure that we're not only making a sound, but we're making a sound that is really been thought of, and has you've put some thought and some artistry into that sound that you're sharing. So you're really connecting with your art. You're really sharing yourself, which is one of the richest gifts I think the study of music gives us as human beings, is learning how to use our voice and be able to more greatly attach ourselves to the music that we make and that we perform. Developing those independent skills aside from music and the rehearsal, though, I also do a lot of leadership work, and I talk a lot about ownership and owning not only your sound, like we talk about in the classroom and in the rehearsal and on the field or where have you, but also talking about owning your actions and talking about creating a space and a culture that people want to be a part of. Greatness attracts great things. So if we are creating an area and a space, and we're doing things that are truly wonderful, it's only going to encourage more people to want to participate and to want to be involved, and really show just how amazingly well faceted the art of music making truly is. So what does that look like? It's We have at least once a month leadership meetings where we have different committees that meet and talk about. I have a culture committee who talks about, what kind of social things do we want to plan a social activity for everybody in the band to have the opportunity to participate in and get to know each other, because you're spending a lot of time with these people. You want to be able to, and you're connecting with them on an even deeper level when you're making music. So you want to be able to know everyone and feel as though everyone has your back and is working as hard as you are when you're in that rehearsal room or on the field. I have an outreach committee that is pretty much in charge of my pep band at this point. I mean, it's very much all student driven. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, we'd like the pep band to play at XYZ, I then take that right on to those student leaders and say, hey, can you reach out and talk to these other people? Do we have enough people to get involved? Do you need music? What resources do you need? Do you need a space to rehearse? And then I am able to give them the keys to the car. I put them in the driver's seat. So they are really seeing just how much making music can impact our community at large. We have another committee that handles publicity, so social media or our school announcements, or whether we're creating spirit wear or something like that. And they will create things, and I really turn to them and say, what kinds of things would you like to do? How would you like to make our band program better? What do you envision? So I try to turn over more of the creative initiative, as well as providing them with the tools and the strategies and the things that they need. So they are really taking over a lot of those tasks. And it's only built an enormous amount of ownership in our program. You'll have some students who struggle, who get stuck, who are really looking for guidance, who aren't sure about taking those next steps, or really need some encouragement to take those first steps. But the more they see other students who are stepping in and taking charge of that, the more they realize, oh yeah, I can do this. I can be responsible for this. I can be in charge of this. And then they see themselves as even more connected, not only with their music, but with their friends and with the social groups that they make. And they have concrete examples of things that they can do and contributions that they've made that my hope is that are only going to help them as they go into college or into the job field or into the military or whatever trade or path may lie before them.
That's awesome. I love how Amy teaching middle school, Lauren teaching high school, there's a lot of similarities in what you're saying musically, but even just, Amy, your words, self-preservation. and hearing Lauren also talk about, I don't do that. The kids do these things. So not only are you really building a lot of capacity for the students, but you're helping yourself too. Because let's face it.
I mean, I know in a lot of places it's very, I remember talking to a director from Texas the summer beforehand, and trying to explain that, like pre-COVID numbers, like my middle school program, I think we had like 240 kids or something between 6th through 8th grade. And it blew his mind that there's one, like there are no assistant directors. We don't have people, coming in and coaching sectional time and all this stuff. Lauren and I work together, but we don't team teach, like we're not teaching in the same class at the same time or anything like that. So we've got to find ways, if we ever want to be able to move forward or accomplish anything, or have the kids finally get those feelings of success, they've got to be able to do some stuff on their own, and they've got to be able to figure that out and know those resources. Because we're outnumbered. So
we are totally outnumbered. Yeah, that is very true.
And it's like Lauren said, it's like you as a teacher can say, over and over, like, I know you can do this. You've got this in you to do this. But when they see their peer do it, then it's like a much more clear communication of like, oh, I can do this, even though you've been saying it for 3 years. So
I love the kids. I'll ask them. I don't know if you've ever heard of, probably have, but the 3 before me rule. I'll ask kids early on, and they'll come up and they'll ask me a question. It's one that I know that they can figure out. Like, they don't need me to answer this for them, but I like when I can ask, hey, do you know the 3 before me rule? And I love when elementary teachers have implemented that, because they're like, yeah, I'm like, cool, figure that one out then. Like, you don't need me for this, and helping them figure, because there's so much, especially early on for those 6th graders, when they first come in, there's so much to figure out about middle school, and they're really looking for that guidance. And I am all about, like, I am here and I will love you and I will do those things, but you don't always need an adult to solve a problem for you. So yeah, I love that when I ask, 3 before me, they're like, oh yeah, my 5th grade teacher. I'm like, cool, your 5th grade teacher and I, same page.
We were talking about this a little before we hit the record button. It's almost funny that we're having the conversation, that we have to like talk about this idea of independent musicianship, because it definitely is. I think it's a little late in coming to the music education field. Any thoughts on that?
I definitely think, as we shared briefly before, going into grad work, I've been wholeheartedly interested in this idea of how do we encourage our students to take more ownership of their musicianship? How do we encourage them to listen more critically and understand that they can get so much learning from themselves, just listening to themselves and processing and thinking about, well, how do I want it to sound and what would I want to do differently and how can I do these things? And just giving them even the ability to think that they can do something and make a change, and that they have the artistic ability to, well, what if I did play it this way, or if it did sound this way, and almost giving them that creative license to, yeah, go ahead, play this phrase 5 different ways, tell me how is it going to sound better? It's something that's always been at the heart of my own teaching. And going into grad school, I was so disheartening to just see that there was so little relative research on this, and it feels as though this is the crux, this is the cornerstone of music education, and here we are, there's a very little relevant body of research for us to even talk about this on an academic level. That's a really big disconnect, because this is exactly what fuels me in my classroom. This is what drives me.
All right.
And sometimes I feel like we're missing out in music education on, there's the project-based learning initiatives in other subject areas. And, you're reading all of these, like I didn't start off immediately, like as a first year teacher thinking like independent musicianship and blah, blah, blah. But it was one of those things I kind of came to going through like different PDs, and they're talking about project-based and doing all of these kind of things where they're talking about ways of having students learn things, independently. And I think sometimes we miss out on jumping on that train as music educators. Like, that's what we're doing. That's, but it's only project-based. And the difference is people like, well, it's project-based learning, but it's like, are you doing it in the traditional sense of master teacher will teach students so that we copy exactly what master teacher says? We've got to be careful in how we approach it. But it makes me nuts sometimes when people come in and they're like, well, we need to be doing this, and this in our music education classes. Like, we are doing that. That's what we do. That's every day. That's part of who we are. That's the experience that, that we're aiming for kids to get. And that was how I got to this, to this point is learning. I remember reading like Innovator's Mindset. And that was one of those books, like I was like, just, having just some of those moments and realizing we can be doing this so much more in music than what we are right now, and finding different books and, finding conversations on Twitter and different blogs and things like that, where we can do this. And this is what we are doing. And it just takes little tweaks here and there to help shift from, teacher A then teaches teacher B. And that's how we teach students to copy teacher A, who really, we have to learn how to package what we're doing better to help other people understand what it is and why it's important. And that eventually it all comes back to it's beneficial for our kids, both musicianship and as people.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, going to years back when you weren't kind of, doing this in the classroom to now, like, what are the big wins for kids? What are the big benefits that you see, the differences in your classroom?
I see kids thinking and listening more critically. And I think that's really, if there's anything that I want my students to walk away from their classroom is, one, I want them to understand just how powerful their voice is, their voice and their sound, not only the sound they make with their instruments, but through their actions and what they do. But I want them to be able to get as much information from thinking and listening critically to those around them, so then they can really take that and grow that piece of information and do something new with it and make new contributions. And I think the more I've focused on independence and the more I focused on ownership in my own teaching through our activities and my interactions with all of our different student groups, the more I've seen them start to realize, wow, I can do more than I thought I ever could. I like, they start seeing themselves taking those steps towards more adult roles and taking more responsibility and taking more ownership. When I see high school students go from freshmen who are walking into school for the first time and they're terrified of everyone and everything, and it's like they get spooked at the smallest little sound, and then turn into juniors and seniors who are, oh yeah, Stan, I got this. I'm going to take these group of rookies and we're going to go work on marching over here. And let's go just for them to realize, oh yeah, I don't have to wait for somebody to tell me what to do. I can do these things. I can take this initiative and I know what I'm doing. And the people around me trust me to do these things. That's powerful. That's at the core of it all.
Totally. I have a senior, actually, my oldest has just graduated high school, and to watch him go in as a freshman and come out as a senior, and he was empowered in some of his sports to be, a leader, and just to watch him grow like that, also in his music program as well. But, and to come out and like his experience in high school is so positive and so strong. He loved every moment. And that's what you want for your kids, right? So yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's so powerful on your end, and it's so powerful from the learner experience too.
And what do you notice at the middle school level, Amy?
We're not quite at that fully, scaffolded level there yet, but I see much more in terms of like ownership and buy-in for my kids. Early on when it came to things like something like programming, right? Not quite in sixth grade yet, because they don't quite know what they're looking and listening for. But by the time we get to seventh grade, my kids usually pick at least one piece per concert cycle. And we talk about, what do we need? Okay, we have 4 percussionists. We can't do, I love me some Randall Standridge. I can't do a lot of, Randall Standridge pieces. We have 3 French horns. How can we highlight that? And talking musically about that process so that they understand, well, I'm not just picking a piece of music because we're picking a piece of music. But they get to be a part of that process and that conversation. And then we vote on it. And we talk about, why is a piece a fit? Why is a piece not a fit? And I've had a lot of times where kids have actually picked something that's a little harder than where I would have gone with it, but because it was theirs, because they own it. And they're like, no, this is the one that we wanted to do, they step up and they rise to that. So not only are they elevating their practice and their musicianship in general, but that takes, it's weird. I'm sorry, I get distracted when my hands disappear over here. This is why I teach middle school. But it takes their practice from, okay, so now we did this concert and we did this piece that was just a little bit harder. That next concert, we push it just even a little bit more, because then we can keep coming back to, man, do you remember like that piece that we did before? This is the same level as that. And we can keep building on those things. And just that kind of stuff, before I was like, I'd pick a piece of music and kids are like, all right, we like every now, you hit gold. And like, I've been teaching middle school long enough to kind of know what are going to be the pieces where they're going to go, yes, when I call off a title. But I love watching them rise to that challenge that they've set for themselves, rather than it being me that set that goal, because they know that they picked it, they get that buy-in, and that helps to continue to build that ownership over what it is, over their own program, over their own musicianship, and ultimately over, where their skill level goes and where it takes them from that point.
Do you see some of the independence and some of the musicianship extending beyond the classroom ever?
The chapter that I got to be a part of in your book is talking about our Genius Hour projects. And Genius Hour is not my concept. It's a concept that I've seen in, lots of other teachers and subject areas and things like that, where they get time in their day to pick their own passion project. And they're required to reach out to outside experts. They have to share their learning, all kinds of different things as a part of that. And I've had students, they don't really realize it in the moment, right? There's so many seeds, especially in the middle school level, that you're planting right now that are eventually going to come back. And I don't always get to be there for those moments. But I've had students then reach out, or family members of students have reached out and said, so-and-so is working on college application things or honors programs and stuff like that. And they specifically said, like, because they had to reach out, we talk about like writing a professional email, learning about how to find your resources beyond your building and beyond your school and beyond your teachers and things like that. And a parent said, like, the student specifically cited, this kid was now, a junior, senior working on college stuff, and said, doing those projects in 7th and 8th grade and having to learn about writing an email, learning about how to reach out to people, and how to correspond and do that stuff, they directly correlated it back to doing those projects in middle school and that building that skill. And so that skill, that project not only helped that student find a different way to be excited about music making and what they were learning in band class, but those skills eventually, learning how to write a professional email and talk to people and find your resources and stuff is so important. And I was so thrilled because that's that little seed that we planted, and it took 3 or 4 years for it to sprout, but they got to take that skill and take that somewhere. And then the leadership, and then obviously all the cool things that Lauren does that help to develop the confidence in that, in that student. But it's so cool to see them take that skill and take that somewhere else beyond, just my classroom.
That's awesome. Like, I think one of the things that is always my goal is I want the kids to see themselves as musical, not only inside the 4 walls of the classroom, but also outside of, and taking the things that we do in the classroom just beyond.
Got it.
So
okay.
Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Oh, I think probably the project or the thing that we do in our classroom that resonates the most with that thought is we do a collaborative chamber music night between Amy and I. And my students, it's multifaceted at the high school, to where at the beginning of the school year, they have to pick a piece that they're going to work on, and they can either choose to go the solo and ensemble track, where they go then and perform it at solo and ensemble, and then hopefully state solo and ensemble, and so on. Or they can choose to do a portfolio track, where each day that we do a chamber music day, where I give them the chance to get in their groups and work together, and they pick who they're going to play with. They pick the music they're going to play with. We talk about, maybe you need to think about your instrumentation before you pick a piece of music, or maybe you need to, once you pick a piece of music, then you go out and find the people who play those instruments to fit, so we navigate through those challenges. But I really give them the opportunity to make all the choices. They just are required to have something that they play, and then they work on it throughout the year. And then that chamber music, then they perform, regardless of whether they did solo and ensemble or a portfolio, to keep track of their progress. They perform it at the very end of the year. And it's a collaborative concert that both Amy and I have our students playing in together. So the middle school students then get to hear the high school students and what they're capable of doing. And Amy and I try to do that a few different ways throughout the school year, but this is one of the the more impactful because it involves all sixth grade all the way up through seniors with this performance. So you have sixth graders who are doing their very first chamber music experience, along with seniors who have now been doing this for 6-7 years, and they're playing, Mozart woodwind quintets or, other various much more challenging pieces of music that these middle school students didn't even have any idea existed before. And now they get to hear these things.
All my kids could talk about this year was she had 2 percussion ensembles that played. And honestly, like we had to, they were both like kitchen sink percussion ensembles. Every toy, gadget, odd end was out there. And that's all my kids, these little kids who had like just moved up to like drum pad and were learning snare bass cymbals. That's all my kids could talk about was they got to see all these juniors, seniors leading this super awesome percussion ensembles. Was so, so, so cool to see.
So then along with the performance part of this for the high school students, I also require my students to compose short pieces of chamber music that they're due at the middle of the school year. So right around our semester mark in January. So that way I have enough time to go through, edit them, sort them to the best of my ability. But then I send them down to Amy, who then assigns the middle school students different pieces that my high schoolers have written. So then my high schoolers
They actually pick them. I don't assign them.
Well, but the high schoolers then get to hear their compositions as well as contribute through their own performance. So they really get to hear themselves as a musician, and they get to hear that something that they did connected with other people, that their work is being played. So just seeing that you don't have to be, a famous composer to have your music played.
Mm-hmm.
You can write music for the sake of writing music, and people will play it. And the best extension of this that I can take this for the next level of growth is that every year for the last 3 years, I have now had students who have come to me and said, Stan, I really like this piece of music. Either it's a piece of pop music or it's from a video game or it's for something. Can I arrange this and can we play it? And I said, you know what? You put in the time to arrange it and write the parts. You're absolutely correct that we are going to play it and we'll find a way to make it work. And I had 2 years ago, I had a senior who is a saxophone player, and it escapes me the piece that they arranged, but they kind of started the trend. And then last year I had a senior who took up the tradition and did something from The Legend of Zelda that my top ensemble played at our spring concert and arranged. And then this year I've already had a student, he's going to be a junior. You don't even know this, Amy, Ryan, who came to me and said, I'd really like to arrange something from Super Smash Brothers. And we've had people do it every year. Can I do it? And it's been amazing. He's been sending me weekly updates with his score, with his MIDI, and he's asking my advice. Like, what do you think I should do with these percussion parts? Or how many clarinet parts do you think we should have here? Should I double it or should I triple it? Like what? And it's, again, just it's amazing. It's amazing to just, once these students learn and show themselves just what they can do, give themselves permission to try these things and do these things. It's amazing. It's amazing. So that's probably one of the bigger extensions of things that I've seen outside of the classroom. And I hope that it becomes an annual tradition from here on out. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. The fact that, they feel like they can. You've given them enough skills and confidence in themselves that they feel like it's something they can do and they want to do. The students who are doing the arrangements, that's not a small task.
I don't have the patience for it.
That Zelda arrangement alone was over 6 minutes long, what we performed this past year. It was an entire staff role with from the credits music, and it was phenomenal. It was very well arranged, and he did it all just from listening to the music, from listening to the score, and put it all onto paper. And It was very cool.
Did you do it for performance? Like at one of your, yeah. Did you share with the audience, like who did
Oh,
it?
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And we had a standing ovation for him at the
That's
end.
amazing.
And so he really had his moment to shine. And he's a extremely talented bassoon player, as well as a baritone tuba player, and very, all about the low end instruments. And he really just was so inspired by the student the year before who did this, and realized, hey, I can do this too, but I'm really more passionate about this music. So I want to arrange this kind of a piece. And again, it's once becoming independent, really just giving yourself permission to try and to do things. And the more we encourage our students to try and to give themselves the permission, go out, make mistakes. That's what it's all about. No one is going to get it perfect the first time around. No one. And if it's something that you enjoy and something that you like, you're going to be much more passionate about pushing through those mistakes and really having something in the end that you're going to be proud of. So just seeing them give themselves permission to do these things, and then just they've taken it further than I had ever even envisioned.
Well, and to do that, you have to also create the environment where they feel like they can, right? It's one thing to say, oh yeah, make a mistake. That's fine. They need to feel like they're safe, right?
Right.
And that's a huge part of all of this, is just creating that environment. So they can ask questions, they can take a risk, they can do something that might not work. So that's huge.
So if people are, getting jazzed about this, which I'm sure they are, like what's something maybe they could try tomorrow?
So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It takes a lot of steps to shift a culture and to change what kids might be used to. So just like I was talking about before, little steps, like with my, with younger students, we're learning a new rhythm. We're learning a new fingering. We're learning a new note. Okay. Here's that rhythm. Here's an example or two. And then a lot of times I'll throw one up on the board, talk to a neighbor. You get 60 seconds and I'll set a timer on my phone, figure out the counting on this new rhythm. Like once we've done it once or twice, and then I have students come up and fix it. Okay. What do we need to fix? How do we work on that? Somebody makes a mistake and we thank them for making the mistake. Oh, I bet somebody else had that same issue too. Thank you so much. I love that you did that, because I could see where other people would have that problem. And encourage, like she was just talking about, right? Letting mistakes happen, letting it be part of the normal process. But giving the students that feeling of ownership, stepping back and getting out of their way a little bit. We give them the building blocks. We are the professionals. Like, this is not to say that the things that we have to offer are not important, but once we get them going, we got to let them run with it. So turn to your neighbor and show them that new fingering. Don't show me. Show your neighbor that new fingering. Your neighbor and you, okay, do you and your neighbor look the same? No, figure it out. It doesn't always have to be the person on the box or the person walking the room. Give them give them those baby steps, give them little places. And for a lot of us too, a lot of band teachers are very type A. I am not. But I know a lot of band teachers are very, very type A, and it's hard to release some of that control. So sometimes the baby steps might not be so much for the kids. Sometimes it's for us. We've got to be able to give them that moment to make that mistake, to have that screw up, so that we're all getting comfortable with the idea of the students taking more ownership and leadership. You don't have to step out right out of the gate. We're going to do a, middle school to high school chamber music project and do this. Take some baby steps, give them those little chances to start building that up and scaffolding it so that they can get to that point where they're comfortable with it.
To bounce off what Amy said too, I think it's also really hard for us as directors to make mistakes, and it has to be a safe place for us as well, because if we have to model for students too, to see. So they see, oh, she's a professional. She's got, how many college degrees? She's been doing this for how many years? He's been my director for so long. They have to be able to see you make a mistake and then how you respond to it gracefully. And I try not to, when I'm on the podium, I'm trying to be as real and as connected and in the present moment with my students as possible. And if I make a mistake and I have a kid that points it out to me, I'm like, thank you for fixing me. I needed more coffee or I needed that, but thank you, because now we're back on the right track. We're making progress and let's move on. So that way, again, they see that making mistakes and being wrong, that's just how you get good. You can't get good. You can't grow. You can't grow. You can't become better until you've made these mistakes, until you've had to not only make them, but correct them. So that way you're really on a track towards growth, and being able to, as a director, see and admit when you make mistakes and how you bounce back from that. That's a huge thing that I think a lot of people can try. Well, can try. It's very hard. I understand it's very hard, but try to be as human as possible in front of your students. And if you want them to make mistakes, they need to see that it's okay to make mistakes from you too. So being open to just being yourself and being human with your kids, and being ready to accept your mistakes as well as accept their mistakes. So that way everyone's going to grow together.
So much. Yes.
Love it. This kind of goes along with what you're both alluding to. One thing that we noticed last season was a lot of people talked about, step one, building relationships with the kids, right? That's the first thing. And that's one of the most important things to do any of this work. They're not going to trust you. It's safe to make a mistake if they have no connection to you. So do you have any quick tips or any things that you currently do in the classroom to help build those relationships with your students? Maybe Amy, you want to go first? Oh, no, Lauren looks excited. Lauren, go.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't mean to look excited, but I'll jump in. So one of the things that has been very important to me very early on in my career, and it was one of the best pieces of actually going into a job interview, one pieces of advice that I ever got going into different job interviews was making eye contact and knowing everyone's name. And they're so small, but you don't realize how difficult it is to make eye contact with somebody until you try to make eye contact with somebody. So making sure that you're looking your students in the eye and that you know their name and that you can pronounce it correctly. And when you're asking them a question using their name, and don't just ask them questions all the time about, well, can you tell me how this rhythm is done? Or can you tell me the correct, tuning for this note? Or what's the pitch tendency here? Or how do you play this correctly? Asking them questions about, how is your day? And are you looking forward to anything this weekend? I mean, just simple things that show you are truly interested in them. This isn't just about them being able to balance the ball on their nose at the right time for festival and getting the score. This is about you truly wanting to get to know them and have that basic relationship. And that's where trust really gets fostered.
I love it.
When we were virtual, it was so easy for, to lose a kid, right? Like you had no idea if they were engaged. And I was realizing that I would go, we were only meeting like 2 days a week for excruciatingly long classes, but only 2 days a week. And I was realizing I would go a week or two without conversing with a kid. And even though it might not have been anything music, like even just to acknowledge that kid's existence, because I would look at my list on who I was on Zoom and I would handle attendance that way. And we were done. And I would I don't think I've spoken that kid's name in a week and a half now. And that realization led me to do, so when we were virtual, I started doing stupid attendance questions. And that was literally like, what's the stupid attendance question of the day? And stupid attendance questions were things like, does a straw have, 2 holes, or is it one continuous hole? How does a giraffe wear a necktie? Like, is it up under the chin, or is it down on I would have visuals, like we would do the whole, and every kid had to answer the question. And even though it had nothing to do with music, I was still at least getting to engage. A kid had to answer me. They had to give me and that's been something that I've tried to take into, now that we're back in, I'm going to use normal very loosely, but normaler-ish. I try and make sure, I see kids 5 days a week, but with big classes and you're playing and you got all the things to do, to make sure that I've somehow connected with like each kid. If I can aim for like at least once a week, just that kid has heard me say their name. That kid has been acknowledged by me in my space. Just to make sure, because there's, that quiet kid who just shows up and does what they're supposed to do. Maybe they're playing second clarinet on that piece, and that's one that you've been really working hard, and they're not just like that kid who's just there, and you forget sometimes because you're fixing this percussion part and the trumpets still haven't figured out that it's this one and not this one. And you're still, you're doing all that other stuff. And that kid, like, they've just shown up and they've done their thing. And I might never have said their name all week because they just did what they were supposed to do. So trying to make sure that every kid hears me saying their name, because I don't call down, again, when you've got 45 kids in class, you don't want to call down attendance every day. Good Lord, that takes forever. So trying to make sure that I acknowledge every kid, with my first hour class, especially on a Monday or after a break. I try not to make a big deal, like, what big thing did you do this weekend? Because not every kid did a big thing, but I just say, what is something that brought you joy in the last 2 days? What's something that made you happy? It could be that you slept 14 hours. I don't care. Like, what's, and every kid's got to answer something, just so that, again, we're getting a little bit of, and I'll share something about me. What did I do this weekend? Because it's not necessarily that it needs to be about me, but just recognizing, like, I don't plug myself in my office when they leave and, recharge overnight, and I've unplug and come out the next day. Like, we're people too. And like Lauren was talking about, just being human with our kids, being human with them, having some human interaction where it doesn't have to be necessarily revolving around those. I actually had a parent call and complain during virtual stuff, because my question that particular day, the alien, like from the Alien movies with the giant head, and they open their mouth and an extra head like comes out, right? The question that day was, how does that alien wear a hat? And there was a lot of debate. We had like 90-minute Zooms, and we spent 40 or 45 minutes debating on how the alien wears the hat. I had a parent call and complain, and my principal called. He's like, Amy, can you explain what's going on? I'm like, connection before content, right? That's what we keep preaching. And when I explained it to him, he goes, that sounds fabulous. So I love that my administrator backed it up, and like, he called the parent and explained what was going on. But those kids, that was the most engaged I had them. And it had nothing to do with music. And that's okay sometimes. It's about those kids getting a chance to be kids, and we were connecting with each other. And they still talk about some of that stuff. Kids still ask, like, can we do an attendance question today? Like, guys, we're down to like a 50-minute class. Those, so it doesn't happen as often. It had nothing to do with music. And sometimes we have to be okay with taking some class time to connect with kids in a way that isn't necessarily music, so that they do feel safe to make music with us when we're at that point.
Yeah. Connection before content. I love that. Yeah. Our big question was, is a hot dog a taco? That was the one that was debated the most in my class.
Yeah. Is a hot dog is it a sandwich? Is it a taco?
I don't
If
know.
I stack one lasagna on top of another lasagna, is it just one massive lasagna now, or is that 2 lasagnas?
Oh no. Oh, the things I'm going to be debating the rest of the day.
Is a milkshake dessert soup? That one got a lot of anger.
Or a cereal soup. That's another one.
Cereal is soup.
Yeah.
Do you pour milk and then cereal and then milk? See, very highbrow questions that we had.
Yeah.
But they remember it, and we had fun, and we got to connect. So,
And that's so important. Awesome.
Well, how can people connect with you too? What would be the best way to look you up or find out what you're doing?
Amy, go first.
So they can find me on Twitter. I've been let's be honest, the last 2 years being what they've been, I've been a little quiet on there and with my blog, but on Twitter, I'm at Amy Lynn Rever, or email amylynnrever@gmail.com. I am happy to connect on, in either format. One of them will find me and I will find you back.
On Twitter, I am also on Twitter. I've been also less active on Twitter as of late, mostly I think though, just because of the summer and trying to unplug a little bit. But on Twitter, I am L Staniszewski 19. So if you've got my last name printed somewhere, that you'll be able to follow along anyway. Like I have to do half the time when I'm signing my checks. So at L Staniszewski 19 is my Twitter handle. Stoney Creek Bands, we have a website. It's Stoney Creek hsbands.weebly.com. And I post on there. SCHS Bands. See, I don't even know my own website anymore. It's been summer break for a month.
I had to give that one out to my 8th graders a lot at the end of the year and print it on my board. SCHSbands.weebly.com.
SCHSbands.weebly.com. Thank you, Amy, for correcting my mistake. And now we can all grow and move on together.
I've got your back. I know
you do. I know you do.
We have this relationship and this connection.
But I post there very frequently about what the bands are doing. We also have a band Instagram and Twitter that the students will frequently do social media takeovers on, and that is SCHS Bands for both Twitter and Instagram, the @ SCHS Bands. So yeah.
My band is we're at Hart MS Bands. I don't give my middle schoolers controls over our social media. I love them, but we're not quite there yet. So, but I do post on, we're scaffolding. So I post on there pretty regularly about, what's happening in the classroom as well.
Perfect. We'll make sure that we put links to all of that in the show notes and everything. And I think it would only be right if someone did contact you, they should ask a good attendance question. So just putting that out there.
I love getting new ideas. I love, I throw them at the kids every now and again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been really fun. Good ideas, just good things to think about. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. Very, very honored to be asked and included.
Likewise, to everything Amy said and then some.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.